Welcome back, John.
Hello.
We did our best to break everything while you were away.
Yeah, probably. I couldn't find the unmute button. It was under a notification tray that's moved in whatever Chrome OS version this is. Yeah, sorry I had to leave forever. I've not caught up at all on what happened in my absence, but I figured I'd lurk. But it seems like there's no agenda, so maybe I'll be lurking about nothing.
We were going to go back to the drawing board. Decided
Perfect.
Maybe reference text wasn't really the right thing.
Okay, I'm for it.
I thought we were reevaluating whether we really wanted to use a DAG.
Oh, I think a lot of people would be happy about that, actually. Not me, but some people.
Just like in general, that whole content addressability was overrated.
Mutable images.
I feel
What do you
like
think?
there may be legislation in the future that outlaws DAGs. What do you mean it's immutable? No such thing.
Welcome back. By the way, John.
Hello. What's up, Brandon? What are you working
on? Lately, reproducibility, which is interesting, finding all the ways things can make themselves unreproducible. You find timestamps in the darndest places.
Yeah. You need to be like a time wizard of some kind.
I've mastered changing the time. That I've gotten really good at. So I can just go through an image and just backdate everything to the commit timestamp. The challenge I run into is that depending on how the image was built, which machine it was built on, sometimes it pulls a timestamp from earlier if you just copy files in and that it was modified, because you can touch a file and that doesn't get pulled into the git commit because it's like, hey, that's just timestamp change. There's no reason to make that a modification in the git history.
Mm-hmm.
So depending on where things happen, those things come in the darndest places. Even Go, as good as Go is about being reproducible, they've got some stuff in there.
It's not great. How are you doing this? I feel like if I were in your position, I would like run everything under gvisor or something and just intercept every single syscall.
So the way I've been doing it, we got no agenda. I can chat about this for a while. I literally run everything through a build-x build. I'm doing a straight Docker image, Docker build to get my multi-platform image, but I export it to an OCI layout instead of pushing up to a registry directly. And then I parse that out into the directory structure because they like to tar it up. I then go through and backdate all the timestamps in the config and the history, all the layers and things like that. And then I push it up. And so most of that's pretty good. There are spots, and then I've also got some other tooling that I'm working on to intercept all the HTTP requests. That involves putting a proxy in the middle of the network connection. So there's some fun stuff happening there.
Sounds intractable.
Interactable or intractable?
The latter.
Okay.
But you can get close, I imagine, and it's probably worth it.
It's when you start capturing all the HTTP requests, and I can replay them later on so someone else can use it later on. Get two challenges. One is not everything is necessarily going to be replayable. Some people might make requests that you just can't intercept and replay because they're going to be unique every time. But the other challenge is, let's say you've got that recording of all the requests. How do you know it's any good? And that you're not just replaying a malicious recording of all the requests. So yeah, you can reproduce it, but you can be reproducing something that's malicious, and that would be no good. So been working on some of those challenges, making it easy to diff between the two different recordings and see what changed, where the malicious data may have potentially come in. It's fun stuff.
Seems like it
Nowhere
could be
near
a
as complicated.
output.
Sorry.
Recording every HTTP request response seems like you'd have that's a lot of bytes.
Which is fun to pack in like a Merkle tag and upload as a massive artifact to the registry, because registries are just designed to store that kind of thing.
Ship it.
Hey there, Amy.
Hey, I figured I'd drop on in. I've got like dueling meetings at this time, so that's why sometimes you get me and sometimes you don't. So
Yeah. I saw that we're planning for, that would be a good thing to talk about today, is you put it in the chat, planning for our session, and you had a
proper
document.
HackMD, yeah. Let me drop
Another
this one into the
HackMD.
notes. People are actually adding things, hooray!
I add a couple things, but I was like, I'm adding more than I can do myself.
That's okay.
So that's always dangerous. But let me put this link in a couple places. One, I'll put it in our chat here,
Perfect.
because we're all just lazy like that. And I'll put it in our meeting notes unless someone beat me to it. Someone beat me to it. Hot diggity.
I'll put it over in the notes doc, but yeah. We're gonna have things, it's gonna be fun. I need to be able to grab a Zoom invite for all of you.
We need to clarify. I'm assuming Mike Brown in the HackMD there is not the Mike Brown that's here in the meeting today.
Correct. This was like a placeholder from the last time that I dropped in, and someone was like, we should talk about this, and I was like, cool. And when I see Mike, I will have him put in more words.
So Mike Brown, am I correct that this is probably IBM Mike Brown that wants to talk about artifacts?
Yeah.
Is this your,
Sorry, you shared the screen and
the mute moves?
it went full screen and I couldn't find the mute button. Yes, that was the other microphone. Though I am interested in talking about artifacts and how to move to GA as well.
I mean, it could be you now. See if I'm not
It's a
specific.
coup.
Well, this is however it works.
Yeah, and part of it is artifacts, part of it is our reference. I want to say refers and the subject field, how to get those to GA. So we've got a couple things we want to get all moved into GA.
I assume that's all one thing, right?
Depends
Is he
on
talking about something else other than what the working group has been working on?
I mean, when he says artifacts, I always assume he's thinking the new manifest.
Right. But isn't that in the image spec? In the same, it'll be the same release as.
It would be the same release.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
I also threw in there my item. Let's see, I could probably go dig that up somewhere. Because we do have, what is it, the TOB, TOC, TO know where to go. TOB. I think I've got one sitting out there. It's been sitting in draft state for a long while. I'll go ahead and drop a link to this one. Just thinking through when you have a reference to like Alpine that gets expanded out to Docker IO, library Alpine, and even then Docker IO wouldn't even the real registry name. How you want to handle things like a reference to an OCI layout, to an immutable tag, maybe we've got other stuff coming on down, just sorting through how we want to make that string standardized. Thought that might be it's an interesting goal of mine. At least it's interesting to me. And so I figure I'll throw it out there as a potential talking topic. Drop a link over here in case people are like, what on earth is this guy talking about when he throws this stuff up there? This one, I gotta pull participants because people jump in on me when I'm saying things. This one is, we were mentioning last week, saying how, okay, we've got the idea of how we've got the refers and the subject field and whatnot to push up these artifacts that reference an image. We need a way to potentially standardize if we've got multiple different things pushing up an SBOM and multiple different things consuming the SBOM, and I'm using SBOM because it's kind of the common example a lot of people find right now, but potentially other kinds of artifacts as well. Standardizing the media types and the annotations that we use for that so that different tools can interact with different, multiple sources can be consumed by multiple consumers, and they don't have to know their individual thing they're consuming. Does that make sense? If we're trying to push up like an SPDX, SBOM, depending on how it gets generated, I don't want to see 3 different SPDX SBOMs depending on different generators and then have to parse apart each one of those individually. It'd just be nice if they all went up in a standard format. Standard field names.
Shouldn't, I mean, I could see having a set of annotations that kind of apply to all artifact types, but wouldn't that be like the SBOM specific annotations? Wouldn't that be the concern of SPDX or whoever is defining the format of an SBOM? Like
Potentially.
we don't do that, do we?
I'm not looking for us to necessarily dictate it, but I would like us to capture it and document it. So for example, I think we've got some, we got media types over here. We've got some documentation that say, hey, here are a whole bunch of our media types. I thought we had in here, we got somewhere, not in here. Somewhere we captured here the different kinds of manifest types as well for the config media type. Might be over in our artifact documentation we've got. We said, hey, here are the different kinds of artifacts that we're going to potentially have. Yeah, here's the table I was thinking of. Where we actually captured, okay, Helm is going to come in and they're going to use this media type. And so we kind of took the effort of capturing a bunch of this so that if there was somebody needed to use a Helm chart, they knew what to look for. And so just getting that captured somewhere of saying, here's the stuff that we know people are going to use for this. So this is what it looks like. This is how you can use it. Makes it easier. Stunned silence, or am I going completely off track? I'm just going to take stunned silence. I suspect part of it is we just want to get rid of this repo too. And so if we got rid of this repo, is stuff like this valuable to try to recapture another way?
And so in the image spec, this is artifact type that we're talking about, right? Or in the image image manifest, it's the config media type.
Yeah. So
capturing, but in the artifact manifest, we say
artifact type.
We say what it should be, and then there's some naming requirements, and maybe registered with IANA. Is that good enough, or would it be better to have something specific in OCI?
So right now I can push something up that may comply with 6838 today. That would be an SPDX SBOM.
Right.
But just because I pushed it with something that complied doesn't mean that someone else is looking for that knows what I pushed, because I can make a lot of values that comply with RFC 6838. And so if I was to try to query and say, let me find this SBOM with this format, how do I know what the person is going to upload it with?
Yeah. And doesn't is SPDX, wouldn't they set that?
They may. And so where I'm going is, can we capture some of this stuff and document it? I'm fine if someone else upstream from us says, this is how you must capture our SBOM. I'm just saying,
Give them a place to point to.
We've got a bunch of examples of people are going to do this. Let's capture what they've done already and just note it down over here. And we're not dictating this is how you must use our spec. We're just saying, hey, there are other people who are using our spec. Here's how they're using it or how they should use it because of their own documentation. And that way, if you're writing a tool that uses one of these things and you're looking for this SBOM, you've got one place to go without having to go 12 places.
Yeah. Sounds fine. How does that goal interact with the sounded like some people were thinking that artifacts repo should go away. Would it be something we put in? Is that a reason to keep that repo around?
I guess part of it is how much of this is spec versus, sometimes you say spec and it gets assumed too much. We've got things in here like implementations, where you say, hey, here are a bunch of people that implement this stuff, and we just have a list of this. Can we capture this kind of information without saying, hey, this is a formal spec for how you do it? We're just saying, hey, here's some extra documentation we're including in the same repo. Because I guess I'm kind of capturing from the hesitation. People are like, oh no, we don't want to capture some of this stuff because that implies that we're becoming a standards body for this stuff that we're not really a standards body of. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, I would just, I think, hate to have a situation where like OCI folks are arguing about the string name of an SPDX media type.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let them do that on their call.
From my view, it's like, okay, if I'm trying to push up one of these things to an OCI registry, it's nice having someone to say, here's how I do it. Just go up and push it with these fields and you'll have it done. And here's OCI just saying, here's the quick and easy way to do it. And we're not necessarily being the standards body for that stuff, but we're trying to be the easy definition for, this is what these artifacts look like in our registry. And so we're taking examples from upstream, but we're just kind of gathering some of that information in one place for people so they don't have to go look in 12 different places.
Yeah, makes sense.
I suspect when you actually get into it with like annotations, things like that, for example, when we have the artifact, no, I want to be in this one. When we have these artifacts, the artifact type itself is only each so far because artifact type is going to be Cyclone DX, SPDX, pick an SBOM, kind of keep picking on the same popular two. But then there's probably going to be some annotations there that say, this is the end, well, maybe not even annotations, maybe that comes into the individual blobs that are in there of saying, okay, this is the top level SBOM. The media type of the blob itself may be JSON, XML, something like that. So it might just be capturing, here's where this media type goes, here's what this media type is going to look like, just so that someone parsing it knows, okay, let me go find that to find the one I'm looking for. But then do we need to have something like this? It says, hey, you're going to have some JSON in there. So that when you do the listing, you can find the one that's got the JSON, not the XML, because that's what your parser's looking for. So not trying to solve it today, but threw the topic on there if you want to chat about it later on. But I definitely get the hesitation of we don't want to standardize. We don't want to conflict with other standards or start a fight of telling someone else how they need to standardize their project. I just want to try to capture someone's information so that if you're trying to implement this stuff and you're looking at how to implement it for OCI, you don't have to say, okay, here's how to do it for OCI, but now I need to go look in these other places to figure out how they do their thing. And then I threw in the big third rail just because I thought it'd be fun. People like the third rail, right? It's been sitting out there for too long. We haven't solved this one. If we can't fill 2 hours talking about this stuff, I don't know what we're going to talk about.
I'd be interested in auth. Yeah.
Presumably this is like mostly taking what the mechanisms that Docker has and standardizing them.
Well,
Basic auth.
I would
something
think
else.
no, because
Make
of
something
what
new.
Docker, I think, per conversations with Brandon about what Containerd does instead, being maybe more correct or flexible. There's not exactly, no one really knows what to do, and every registry does something slightly different in a way that is like really frustrating.
I've found good ways to break every registry.
Yeah. Like every registry works with Docker. That's all we have. It'd be better if like other clients could know what to do and not just do what Docker does.
And not only that, once we include this in our standard, then we can make it something that the conformance test checks for. And so then your registry can say, not only am I standard with all the other distribution spec stuff in there for all the API calls, but also for authentication, then we eliminate some of that confusion of, okay, which client is right. I've definitely found ways to break this. To throw some examples out at you, Michael, so that you can be terrified. Docker likes to go through and pre-compute what the scope should be, and then sends that request. And so it's pre-computing what that authorization request needs to look like. If you look at something like the HTTP spec, the HTTP just says, hey, you get that header back that says you need to authenticate, and it's going to tell you what server to go and what fields you need to send to that server to request your authentication. And so you could easily do lazy authentication, which is the bad thing that I do that really upsets people like John. Or I just request the resource. I don't even bother trying to do the authentication. I just say, let me go straight to that manifest or blob or whatever and just try to pull it. And if it pulls on the first request without any authentication, great, I saved a whole bunch of round trips. And if it did need authentication, then the server tells me right there when I pull the manifest, hey, you need to authenticate with this field to try to pull that object. And so instead of me pre-computing it, I can do it lazy. I've had to back a bunch of that out. I had to kind of follow the Docker way because a bunch of registries really don't like that. But once you go that far, then you start getting into other challenges, like if you want to do cross-repository blob mounts, what do the authentication headers look like then? Because a lot of this stuff is only dealt with pushing and pulling from a single repository. So challenges get more and more interesting when you get when you get to those scenarios.
client code is earned through lots and lots of little cuts.
I'm sure the server side is just as bad. They see all the crazy clients throwing all kinds of junk at them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm scared.
So yeah, between all that, I figure we can easily take 2 hours. Probably could take more if we wanted to. But those are a few that I threw out there. So I will stop sharing there as I quickly flip through the tabs to see if there's anything else important that I want to talk about. Just bring up anything that you're interested. Oh, I do know something I want to talk about. How did that fail? Oh, I know why that failed. I do have one other thing sitting out there, which is we had the request to release a 103, and I was the one that went through the headache of a process, which notified the whole world, apparently, of cherry picking all the stuff that we had from 102 to just before we started doing the working group output. Because folks were like, hey, we haven't had a release in 5 years, apparently, from 101 to 102. And then we did 102. That was just a cherry pick of one individual thing. So there's a lot of stuff that never got released. So that's sitting out there. There were questions of, hey, should we even be doing that? Should we, instead of doing this, just do a checkout direct on main and maybe create a new branch off of that point, do a couple commits that we might need for some CI fixes and then go off there. I'm happy to rework this, whatever makes the most sense, but just raising some visibility. This is sitting out there. There's a DCO because of one commit from long, long ago that is on main right now that has that issue. Apparently, no, I think that's just because I was cherry picking them. So a bunch of those got put in just because of my cherry pick. But a few of these got pulled in. I think this is the big one, which was just a small change to some of the maintainers, which I suspect a bunch of this even changed since then. And it didn't have the sign off message in there. And then apparently some of this stuff, maybe because of my cherry picking, got flagged for a few others. So we would have to bypass the DCO error. So I'm getting at, which I think we can do. So what do people think about getting a 103 release out and how we should do it? Or have you been blissfully ignoring this?
The latter.
I was about to say, I feel like a lot of people are enjoying the bliss right now. It was not fun going through all of the changes in there, but in fact, I think I got a bad line there. I shouldn't have that one PR. Yeah, feel free to have a look through. It was, like I say, we're just trying to pull in everything except what the working group did. So I do need to go through and change that message up there. But otherwise, if this makes sense, great. Let's go ahead and pull it out of draft and get it merged. If it doesn't make sense, we can change it. But there was someone that basically said, hey, I need this release because they can't depend on just main for all their use cases. They want to actually have a release that they can depend on. Now, the main reason to get everything before the working group is the assumption that the working group output, and this could get into what we want to talk about, which is, how do we move this to GA? I think a good chunk of the answer of how we're going to move it to GA is we'd like to see some registries, some users, people actually implementing this and verifying that it works. I'm assuming that's a 3-month, maybe, hopefully not too much longer in that kind of time frame here. And so I figure getting a 1 or 3 out before then might be useful for people. If it's quicker to just release the 1.1, that works too.
And when we say see things implemented, is that implemented in things like distribution or implemented in actual, like in like cloud registries or in Docker or wherever?
I feel like it would be good if we saw it in a cloud registry, but I'm one voice submitting that. We got multiple maintainers. What are your thoughts? What point would you want to wait for before you said, okay, let's go ahead and tag a 1.1 on this?
I mean, speaking to someone who works on a cloud registry, it's a little scary to think about launching support for something that is not quite finalized. Like, how do we guarantee that we can not break customers if we launch something and then the spec changes?
I'm going to lean toward John at this point because I feel like he's the next best one with experience in this
What do you
field.
think, John?
Yeah, I mean, there's not really like alpha, beta compatibility guarantees, right? That we have. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to roll out anything, especially across multiple organizations and companies. And like, it's hard to get buy-in from, say, your employer to implement something that's not finalized, especially if the finalized process requires implementations. So there's a bit of a bootstrap problem here. I don't know. I think we all have to just kind of agree to that it's good at some point, but I haven't really been paying attention for a long time, and so I don't know like what level of maturity we feel this is at. I know people have been messing around on the playground. I wonder, I'm coming with like no knowledge in my brain of what's happened in the last few months, so I don't know what y'all have discovered. Brandon, do you have opinions?
My opinions are all from the client side, which is, hey, I wrote it, it works. We're done.
It's lovely.
Isn't that a great place to be?
Nice work.
From the server side, you guys got work to do. And I feel I want to make sure I don't break anything from your side. So let me find the part. I know scrolling is never fun to watch someone do, especially if you're trying to read what they're reading and I'm not even reading it. But I want to find that part of the spec. I probably already passed it. Content discovery. Here we go. After listing tags, we got the listen refers. This is probably the big thing to support, which is, hey, we're going to have this new API. And that API right now, we're eliminating to a digest. And the response to that API is an index. And it's a list of manifests that have a subject field inside of that manifest that points to this digest that you just queried. So what that means for a registry trying to implement, not quite sure what you might need for like creating a new field in your own database with an index and whatnot on your side to try to keep these queries efficient, what it looks like in terms of caching the responses so that you can avoid having to regenerate this every single time someone queries it. I'm sure there's some work.
I'm just reading this for the first time and I hate it.
I promise we weren't waiting for you to be out for us to write this.
Oh, I know. I have no standing to complain.
What sorts of things do you hate? And I really want you to say it's just not flexible enough because you want to be able to include blobs and other kinds of stuff. And
it's not, it doesn't cover the case I was interested in where you can walk back through arbitrary relationships between manifests, not just a hard-coded relationship. So like the fact that it must include an artifact type means that we can't, well, I guess we could relax that, but like I would like to be able to go from a child to its parent, not strictly a, what is it called now, an artifact manifest to its subject.
Yeah, we didn't go completely unrestrained. I will say the artifact type, we've got this filtering and whatnot in there. Do we define in here? I think we defined somewhere, but I don't want to scroll around looking for it. If it's got like an image manifest, artifact type comes from the config media type. And if it's the artifact manifest, it comes from the artifact type. So it's, since the artifact manifest doesn't have a separate config in there, that's why we put that field over there. But
wait,
it can be an empty string.
And it can't be an index either, right?
Correct. We only allow these two things to have a subject, which kind of defeats part of what John's looking for.
Which is the only parent-child relationship.
Yeah. I'm not thrilled. I don't understand the first entry here is because you can have a subject and an image.
Yeah. So we changed image spec. So let me go find.
What are these annotations? Are they a projection from the
pull up
other thing?
Yeah, we pull them up. So if I look at the manifest now, we have now defined in manifest a subject field. And so when subject is defined, if you query this string here, you'll get back this manifest as one of the entries in there, along with the annotations that manifest had. The idea being, go ahead.
I'm going to open this page so I can stop just asking you questions.
Yeah, the idea is we want to allow you to query an image that has multiple things that refer to that image, multiple things with that subject field defined pointing to it, to get back an index of results and to be able to look through that list of results and say, these two are the ones I'm looking for. And all this other stuff that might be having subject fields pointing to it just don't relate to my client of my use case. And so I can ignore them all.
How set in stone is all this? Like, can I change a must to a should? Or are we pretty happy with me out of the room?
I mean, we strangled some necks trying to get this thing going to the point we got it to. Which ones are you thinking about changing?
Just the annotations. That becomes more difficult to do if we have like arbitrarily large things to include in this response. I assume some stakeholder is like, this is a hard requirement, or is this just a nice to have thing? I see must, so I imagine someone really argued for it.
Yeah, from the client side, it's a must, because if I don't have that, then I have to query every single one of these and pull back every one of these manifests to find the thing I'm looking for. And
yeah, but at least you can,
So, and I know Michael's already probably doing like a "yeah, I told you so" dance right now. But yeah,
No, I'm not dancing. Just laughing.
Yeah. It definitely went back and forth a bunch of annotations because your concerns are shared. I'll put it that way. The one way we looked at it is that the manifest itself that we're pointing to, whatever this thing is limited to the 4 meg limit. Annotations themselves, we talked about, do we want to make limits on these?
So like the concern, well, the client's going to have to query every single one. So yeah, then the server's going to have to query every single one. Like,
But
and
you've
if this
already got
doesn't
it the
have
server.
pagination, yeah, I don't think I'm going to implement that for sure, but maybe.
It does have pagination.
Does it?
There is some. Yeah, it does.
It's
We
in
have
there.
we have
I'm
we have
looking for it.
pagination in there. I think
Really?
there's been some discussion. I think one of the discussions we could have is whether or not, I think the spec currently is implying. Well, there's no page limit specified, like no page size. But I think Brandon and others, when we talked about this last, we said the limit would be something along like what the limit for a manifest is. Was that right, Brandon?
Yeah.
So like, but I don't, I think my opinion was that we would probably implement it in a way where we had a page size that made sense, and if clients need to make additional calls, they would have to do that. Like, I think that would still work with the spec.
We're assuming the response here is going to be within the 4 meg. And each one of these manifests here should be 4 meg or less. They've got other stuff in these individual manifests that can make them large. And so you've got all the layers and whatnot. But potentially, if you're getting into 4 megs, it's probably because someone went crazy with the annotations. One of the reasons we are kind of pushing for this structure in general, though, is hopefully the standard use case. I'm looking at like the normal average use case is that you're going to have this thing. It looks like it's going to be a couple hundred bytes. Say it's like 500 bytes in an average use case, although it'll probably be less than that. 500 bytes for a record divided by the 4 megs you've got, you're going to have, I don't know, what are we talking about? Thousands of these entries in here before you have to even page out to a second page. And so that's kind of where we're looking at the trade-off of saying there's going to be a whole lot of these before you even have to start worrying about it. The thing I hear from you, and it is a concern that has been shared, is okay, yeah, great. You're talking about the average use case or the normal real world use case, which is great and all, but someone's going to try to break this. Yeah, usually it means me.
I now either need to index, maybe not index, but like store annotations twice, or I have to store a parsed out version of every manifest, or I have to join against every manifest content, or I guess fetch the manifest content separately, parse it as JSON, pull out the annotations, and then stick that in there. I hate it.
Yeah.
It's just, it makes it way more expensive server side to do. But it's probably too late to argue that.
Hey, no matter what, you're parsing it to get the media type and the artifact type, and to see the subject.
Like these are fixed length. Well, I guess your media types could be arbitrarily sized, but in general, these are like known sizes that I can put in a row. whereas the annotations becomes like I can't parse it once. I have to stick all the annotations in a separate place. Meh. I'll have to think about it. This becomes harder to implement than I want it to be, but maybe it's I'm just missing it, or just slow,
So-
which is also fine, I guess.
Yeah. So in terms of what has to happen before we make this GA, I think making you happy enough that you'll say that you would implement it is the key detail.
Yeah, I don't want to be in that position though, but I guess that is true. That's like 100% true, but I don't like the characterization, even though it's accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to spend some time thinking about like how would I implement this, and if I decide I can't, then I might come back and say, yeah. Sorry, Michael. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, if we are gonna have this conversation, we should have it as soon as possible, and not,
Yeah.
after we release the spec.
Yeah.
So
Is
it may not be
or-
the best time to have it, but it's the best time that is still possible.
Sure.
There's no time like the present.
We're not hoping to include this in a 103, right? Like,
This was
No.
explicitly excluded from the 103.
cool. Then I feel like I have at least a few days to think about this.
Yeah. So you can think about this, but then you still need to jump on that 103 ticket and say, okay, here's what we can do to actually get that one moved.
Right.
And
Yeah.
whether that's
I don't
approve as
solve it.
requested or change it, I'm fine with either.
Sure. Can we like revert all these and put them on like a release branch for the future, like a feature branch? Is that annoying?
Well,
Probably not great.
which one are you saying? The working group output?
Yeah, like if that was on a separate branch and then like we could cut
Yeah.
from main. Maybe you were saying this earlier.
I think we bypassed that one by just pushing right on main. The challenge
see.
we got now is 1.0 has a branch. But I think that was mainly cut and retroactively updated because of the 102 security fix.
Yep. It's my fault.
I'm not upset for that. But then we also had like 5 years of other updates in there that didn't get into that 102. So trying to figure out the best way to either update that 1.0 branch to either change where that branch starts from and then do something, or just the right Git handling of, okay, we got this old branch, or not too old branch, but somewhat old branch that's missing all these commits, to either update this or to change this to be off of main just before we did this, and then cherry pick a few other things, because we do have some CI stuff that came in after the working group that we need to pull in as well. So we still need a branch. It's just how do we manage it?
Right. Okay. I'd bug Vincent about that. He usually has really good opinions about Git history.
Yeah, I think he was pulling out a little bit of hair saying, oh no, we messed this thing up terribly. I don't want to touch it again.
Sure.
But yeah. So do we terribly upset you over here?
Yeah, but it's okay.
Yeah, this was definitely, you keyed right off of it. This was definitely one of those things where the two sides were differing opinions. And the challenge came from, okay, well, what the servers want versus what the clients want. And from the client standpoint, if I just have a manifest come back and say, here are a whole bunch of descriptors without any other details about it, like, well, that's great, but now I got to do 300 requests, 300 manifest polls.
Yeah. I mean, if I end up implementing this as is, I'm just going to have like page size equals 1. And so you end up having to do n+1 queries anyway. I guess n instead of n+1. So I'll save you one.
Oh, the terror. I can see some logic to that, though, because each one of these is going to be its own self-contained index.
Yeah, I mean, I just like I can't buffer that much stuff per request. Ideally, just thinking about, how can I avoid this being particularly expensive?
I feel like what Michael was talking about earlier was more on the caching side, generating this once and then being able to cache it. And so if you can build all this at the time that something gets updated, say you see a new manifest, that subject field, then you just build this index once and have it available for a cache pull. There's some efficiency there.
Yeah, I remember we sort of had this discussion in one of the working group meetings where I said something along the lines of this doesn't work with an index, and there were some interesting, I think there were definitely I think Jason had some thoughts on ways that it could be implemented that were interesting. I don't know if we would actually do it that way, but yeah, it amounted to sort of generating these as documents in a CDN or something. And then in a lot of cases, this becomes a lot cheaper, but it's hard because these documents could change at any time. Unlike a lot of the other CDNable things in a registry, which are content addressable.
Well, these, I mean, you could hash these.
You can hash these. They just
content addressable.
What it's like invalidating them is a little bit more complicated. Like you can still do it, but
yeah, you'd have to maintain that yourself.
Yeah,
that's
it's a different problem. Unless we go back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the call, getting rid of the DAG altogether.
No.
Just make it this complicated for everything.
Yeah, I don't want to pre-compute these because that's complicated.
If you don't pre-compute them, can you cache what you computed once so you don't have to recompute it between the point that you did it the first time and whenever it changes the next time?
Yeah, we could bump some identifier. Yeah, I just set some E tag, and that changes every time you do an operation that would modify this response.
I remember people asking, what's the digest on this thing? Can they depend on that? I was like, this is a dynamically generated thing. I hate to see you depending on the digest, but at the same time, for an E tag, that would work.
I mean, I think if you re-push this, sure. Right, like you could snapshot the state of the refers by just copying this back into the registry. That'd be fun.
Yeah, so in the time you've got to think about this one, pull out some hair.
I don't have much left to pull out.
You and me both.
Saved it for y'all, I guess. Okay.
Well, yeah,
maybe we can. You can convince me I'm wrong.
What was that?
Maybe you can convince me that I should like this, and then that'll help me internally.
I like it from a client side. From the client side, it works pretty well for solving our challenge. But I don't have to deal with the problems you have to deal with from the server side.
Yeah, I would just look hash hierarchy makes this fun. Oh, this is cute. Okay, 404 is not implemented, but an empty response is different. That's cute.
Well, the reason is that 404 is already being used.
Yeah.
If a
yeah,
registry
like
doesn't
that.
implement this.
I like that.
We wanted to differentiate between a registry that didn't have this API and a registry that didn't have any entries in the API. Because there is, here we go, backward compatibility. There is a fallback where we start looking for, okay, if I'm looking for this digest, the screaming into the void digest there, to go look if you know the cosine syntax where they do the dot sig at the end of this, we just took the dot sig off. And so
Okay.
without the dot sig on the end, we're like, okay, that's our field that we're going to use over there. And we query that and we get back an index. And that works fantastically with backward compatibility because all registries should already support the index. And we just push it up to a known name. And it's the exact same response we get from the API. And so client compatibility with the old and the new works very cleanly.
Did we settle on like a way to positively indicate support for conditional requests?
We have not.
That would be nice.
It would be. I think I still need to, believe it or not, I have an ongoing Slack reminder that hits me every week where I told you that I was going to look at something next week. And it's been about 4 or 5 months now. Every Monday I get a ping saying, I should work on this thing for John.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I totally forgot about that. Cool. Yeah, do it.
So yeah, as OCI and going on upstream as well to try to get those conditional requests. We have not done that yet, but that would be good. But even then, an existing registry today probably would not support that. And we've just accepted that there will be, we put this note in italics because people want italics there. There may be race conditions and data loss. So there is an advantage to having the API available.
Enabling the refers API.
I mean, we said you may do this. But I'm not expecting an existing registry today to have already done that.
No. I mean, I like this. This will give me some ammo to like go implement this stuff anyway. I want conditional requests because that solves a large class of problems for us.
Indeed. Anything else for the day? I know this is digesting months worth of work just as you get back and probably have 10,000 emails.
Just 1,000. I archived most of them. I have 1,000 from GitHub I haven't archived yet, but I don't think I'm going to read those. But if someone like pinged me on GitHub, I don't have any idea that happened. Re-ping me. Sorry.
Those are disposable.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Brandon, for just explaining all the stuff to me because.
Thanks for coming back. We were afraid you were going to be like, yeah, we don't want to see those guys again.
I thought about it. But then I felt some weird obligation to help. So here I am. Okay. Well,
great seeing you.
Good to see you. Have a good rest of your week.
All right. You too. Take care.